It's cold out here in Ohio, and in this type of wintry weather, it usually means if you've got livestock, bring them into the barn. Well, not so for the type of unique cattle we're discussing today. I'm Joel Penhorwood for Ohio's Country Journal and USYAKS, and join me as we head over to western Union County to look at a unique agricultural operation utilizing yaks.
This is perfect yak weather. They really like the cold temperatures. The snow doesn't bother them at all. They really only go into the barn for access to water. Aside from that, they're just out in the cold temperatures. I'm Blake Mathys. This is my wife, Demi, my daughters, Destiny and Autumn. Welcome to Covered Bridge Yaks. My family and I have been raising yaks in our farm in Union County, Ohio since 2015. So I've always grown up with livestock. We also had horses and sheep and goats and chickens and all kinds of things. We became interested in yaks because we wanted something a little different, a little bit outside the norm. I feel like everybody has regular cattle. Yaks are a little bit unusual, and they're a lot of fun. Why not? Yaks are they're fun. They have the horns, they're hairy. They're a good conversation piece. You can eat them, you can sell them. They're an all-purpose type of livestock.
Mathys says many of their yaks are destined for meat, which they market direct to consumer, as well as through various local grocery stores. The meat, very, very lean, he says.
When they're growing, they put their fat more on the outside of the muscle, then less of the marbling, less inside the muscle, and so that results in a very lean meat. They are pretty slow growing, so it takes about 3 years at least to get like a steer up to appropriate weight to butcher. Because the meat is so lean, it really is something that a lot of consumers are looking for. They also are kind of nice because they do cross with regular cattle. And so you can have crosses. We have one out here right now that is half yak, half regular cattle, and they grow a little faster, maybe get a little bigger than a regular yak, and so it provides kind of a mixture of the characteristics of both.
Along with their slow growth, yaks have some other special considerations from a management perspective.
They do require a lot of copper in their diet, so that's one way they differ from regular cattle is they need a lot of copper. That's something they're usually deficient in. Summer's their least favorite time of the year. They of course have the issue with the long hair. Flies can be a little bit of a problem. We make sure that we have our calving in the fall after fly season is over so the calves don't have to worry about all those flies. They like if you can have something like some water for them to get into, get a little cooled down, but overall they do okay with it. In the winter at least require very little care.
Yaks originally from the Himalayan region, they were brought to the Americas in the early 1900s. Yak meat not allowed to be imported into the United States. That means all yak you purchase here was raised in the country.
The only special things we've had to do is with the butchering. We had to find a butcher that does an exotic butchering and has the USDA inspection of that. It took a little bit of effort to find a butcher who'd do it. I contacted quite a few before I found somebody who was doing exotic butchering. As with any livestock, you always got to keep an eye. I always keep an eye on our bull, but most of them are pretty easy to work with. And because they're a little smaller than regular cattle, that makes it a little easier to keep them in, a little less hard on gates and fence and so forth. A heifer bottle calf right now that is very friendly and is a lot of fun and is very popular with the family.
Yaks are a dual-purpose animal through their fiber.
One way that some yak producers make some extra money is in the spring to comb out the fiber from the yaks. It's a very, very, very soft fiber. It's actually relatively valuable. We recently just finished putting in our chute and head gate, so we'll have the opportunity this spring to comb them out and maybe collect some of that fiber. So yaks come in a few main colorations here in North America. The black and white yaks are known as royal. And then the yaks that are mostly black with a little bit of white on the forehead and usually on the back feet, maybe the tip of the tail, are called trim, and they tend to be the most common yaks. Yaks can be a little difficult to find because there aren't as many. Some of the exotic animal auctions will have them. Most of our yaks have come from private individuals. A couple of these have come from Kentucky, from Indiana. I'm always keeping an eye out for when people are selling yaks close by.
As far as catching up with other yak producers, it's a small world, he says.
There's not a lot of yak producers. There's a few people who have a few yaks. There's one other farm down in southern Ohio that raises a lot of yaks, but it's pretty limited. Just a few, and really just in the eastern part of the United States. Not that many, maybe a dozen or so.
Included among that select group is Greg Dike of USYAKS in Wellington, Kentucky. Greg is president of the USYAKS Association, which is in the process of becoming the North American Yak Association. Their organization promotes a science-based registry for the livestock.
And for a long time, the yak industry in the U.S. has pretty much been a kind of a hobby thing. You know, people have 10 or 20 or whatever, but, you know, it was, most people were not trying to make a living out of it, like somebody starting a dairy herd or beef herd. But what you've got now, there are some people who've been doing it, but they're just sort of out there doing it silently. You don't hear a lot about them, but have done great things, you know, selling meat and things like that, and developing meat herds that are quite spectacular, but in terms of the quality of the animals. But what you have now are people, 3 or 4 farms now, ranches, where they're really developing big meat operations. I mean, big commercial ones where they're slaughtering, you know, 100 to 200 animals a year. There are a lot of issues going on now about the agricultural industry, right? You know, in terms of the environmental impact, about red meat and all that stuff. Okay. So one thing the yaks have is the fiber, and people will argue that it's good because animals that, a lot of fiber animals are very destructive to the pastures and so on, but yaks are not. So it's sort of less destructive, natural way to get fiber, and the fiber is of very high quality. In terms of the meat, the thing about yak meat that's interesting is that it's and we've done some tests. We tested grass-fed yak against all the different qualities of Angus, you know, the choice, the super choice, the whatever, you know. And we tested against bison as well. And we used sirloin as the test. UK did the test. They all came out really high protein, you know, like 22% or something. And they're all about the same in the protein. It was in the fat. The yak was slightly, and it was probably within statistically equivalent to bison, but the number was slightly better. It was like 98, 99% fat-free. And your Angus were down a few percentage points and then lower depending upon grass-fed, not grass-fed, choice, this or that, you know, however much. And then yaks, you know, have the like omega-3 and omega-6 and that kind of stuff. So in terms of being a red meat, if there is one that's healthy, your yak meat is going to be at that end, okay? So from a health side, your yak meat is probably your healthy red meat. Bison would be right up there too. And it's the leanness. But then again, with the leanness, you know, you have to cook it properly or else you end up with a piece of cardboard very quickly because, you know, you look at a picture of yak meat and it's just red. I mean, it's just red. There's no fat that you say. The future's good, and you've got younger people coming in. You know, your younger people getting into it and being creative of, you know, not playing by all the old rules. I think things are going to happen. Plus the fiber business will take off. People are getting more and more into that across the country. So it's a good time.
Back in Ohio at Covered Bridge Yaks, their eye for unique livestock has us asking what's next for their farm.
Well, the one that I've always wanted to get and have never had is I'd like to get a few water buffalo. I almost bought one once, but somebody else bid again, luckily. So someday I'll get a couple of water buffalo out here.
From Covered Bridge Yaks, I'm Joel Penhorwood reporting for the Ohio AgNet.